what happens for so many people is when they feel pain, they think something is defective. And the truth of it is that pain is a signal to you that something's off balance. And 9 times out of 10, what's off balance is not where the pain is. So, because your body balances front to back and side to side, if the front of my thighs get tight or go into a spasm, I'm more than likely going to feel the pain in my lower back when I stand up.
What if the small aches and tightness in your body are early warning signals, not just problems you can ignore? In this episode of Give Yourself Some Leeway, Butch Phelps of the Muscle Repair Shop shares his journey from struggling with being overweight and having chronic discomfort to understanding the powerful connection between the brain, muscles, and your long-term health. He explains how learning to listen to your body can transform the way that you prevent pain and maintain vitality as you age. We talk about why pain is often a signal rather than the root problem, how muscle balance and flexibility supports your longevity, and the practical stretch and release techniques that work with your brain's natural protective mechanism. If you want to stay active, prevent chronic pain, and see what it takes to be a high performer in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, this episode is for you. Butch, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway. I have been looking forward to this since our first conversation because the way you speak about the human body, it's like you read the body like a book. And you seem to
Yes.
have an understanding for the human body that most of us tend to overlook.
Yes.
We were talking about like how people ignore the niggling pains, maybe lower back pain, or they might have headaches and strain. And the first thing they look for are the painkillers, or how do I get rid of this niggling pain, or put like deep heat or tiger balm on the pain to kind of to keep going for another day, to get by for another day. But the way that you address not focusing on the pain, but where the cause is, and you explored this as well on the muscle repair shop. On it's like a library of these videos of saying like stop looking for the pain and find the cause of the
Yeah.
pain, which I feel is just a treasure trove. So I want to start off by thanking you for all of that and for introducing me to all of that. And what I really want to get to, starting off the podcast on a tangent already, but what I really want to understand is where did this all begin for you? What got you onto this journey?
Great question. But first off, thank you for having me on your show. I've been looking forward to doing this. We talked earlier, and it just had a great time talking to you. So this started for me on a personal basis at about age 36. I was up to about 315 pounds. Now I'm like 6'4", so I looked like a wall when I was walking down the street. And I happened to go to my GP, who I'd been to for a few years, and she did blood work on me like they typically do. And finally, she said to me one day, she said, "Let's go to my office and chat for a minute." And I go, "All right." So I went and sat down, and she said to me, "You're soon going to be 37 years old." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, your family has a history of heart disease." And she said, "I'm looking at your blood work." And she said, we checked your carotid arteries." And she said, "You're starting to get a little bit of blockage at 37, which is not good." And she said, "Your blood work is off the chart." She said, "Man, if I'm putting a bet on you," she said, "I'd bet by 40 you'll have a heart attack or stroke easily." And I was like, "Whoa, that's not good." But then she said to me, "I've been studying nutrition." And she said, if you're willing to work with me, I'll work with you one on one and teach you how to eat correctly." And so she did. And so what she did was she didn't really put me on a diet, because she said that not that diets don't work. She said the problem with typical diets that we see, you can lose the weight on most of them. The problem is you can't sustain and maintain that weight once you come off of it. There's no follow up with that. And she said, "What I want to do is I want to mess with your head a little bit about food and get that to turn around." Well, I followed what she said. It took me about 18 months. And in 18 months, I lost 105 pounds. So that put me in 1998. And so from 1998 to 2020, I maintained my weight. So I went and I visited another doctor at that time, because my last doctor had retired. And she was into the BMI scale, which I'm not a real fan of because it doesn't really account for muscle mass. And she said, uh, you're at 210. She said, you're too high, you're a little heavy based on the BMI scale. And I said, really? So I sort of laughed and I said, so where should I be at 6'4"? She goes, somewhere between 180 and 190. So this was during the COVID. I wasn't working. So I said to my wife, I'm losing the weight. I'll just go back to what I did. I'll drop another 30 pounds. So I did. So I walked back in on a follow-up 6 months later at 180 pounds, but she freaked out when she saw me because I was really thin. And I laughed and I said, so the problem is you've never seen anyone at the weight you're recommending. Well, I guess not, So that was the part on the eating side that as I learned, and of course I put about 15 pounds back on so that I didn't look so sick. But that's the point, is that we know how to lose weight. What the problem is how do you keep it off and maintain it on a lifetime? We'll go back to when I lost the first 105 pounds. I had been an athlete, I'd been a trainer. And so I knew I had to get myself in shape. So I started working out like crazy. And I developed low back pain around age 40. It was so bad that I'd crawl out of my car on my hands and pull myself up by the door handles at 40 years old. And I thought, this is insane. And I'd go to doctors like everybody else, and they offer me pain pills. Some of them would offer me injections. Others would offer me back braces. And a couple had said, well, if it doesn't get any better, we could do some surgeries to help that. And I was like, I don't really want to go that route. And I got into studying muscles. In fact, I started as a neuromuscular sports massage therapist, and I got into the muscle side of it. And I started to see that I knew things about muscles that I had no idea where I had learned those or how I knew those. They just were there in my head somehow, because I had never really studied health prior other than just working out as a trainer. And as I started to dig into it, I started to get teachers who were starting to come in and start talking to me. And then I started picking up people who were mentors. And two of my mentors were neurosurgeons. Another one was a kinesiologist. And then I had a chiropractor and a PT that was helping out as well. And they sort of brought me pieces to the puzzle about how that body works and or my body, I should say, works, and what I should be looking for. And this is a long-winded kind of thing, and I apologize for that. But once I started looking at my body differently from what most people did, I could see the changes that I could make. And as I made those changes, my body started to change quickly. I would get 2-3 blood tests a year because I'd look at my blood tests like the gauges on the dash of your car. What happens for so many people is when they feel pain, they think something is defective. And the truth of it is that pain is a signal to you that something's off balance. And 9 times out of 10, what's off balance is not where the pain is. So because your body balances front to back and side to side, if the front of my thighs get tight or go into a spasm, I'm more than likely going to feel the pain in my lower back when I stand up. When I sit down, it goes away, but I stand up, it comes back. Or I get out of bed in the morning, it comes there. But for most people, when they get up out of bed and they feel that back pain, they think they have a back problem. And 9 times out of 10, what they have is a thigh problem. So understanding that about the body and how that works, all of a sudden you start to change the way you look at the body from strictly a mechanical thing to this is a living, breathing thing that has emotions, it has mechanical stuff to it. And it's about how we hold ourselves to muscle strength and so forth. And we'll get into that more as we talk. But all that comes to play. And then once you stop looking at it purely as a mechanical thing, all of a sudden the way you look at your body changes.
I want to go back a little bit on what you said earlier about
Yeah.
when the nurse told you to lose the weight based on the BMI. Again, I have very similar views with you on the BMI. Like, it does not account for muscle mass. And you see people drastically losing weight, and next thing they are literally just like skin and bone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fits in their BMI. Like for me, I'm the same. I'm about 6'4". I'm weighing
Mm-hmm.
somewhere between 190 to 210 on a good day,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
depending on where I want to be. But on the lighter end, I would look like skin and bone if I stayed around
Yeah.
the 180 to 190 all the time.
Yes. Yes.
It leaves out the importance of muscle mass
Yeah.
and the importance of growing that muscle for longevity. Because you probably have more experience with this, that
Mm-hmm.
uh, the likelihood of a break or a fall being damaging later on in life is probably much higher if you don't have the muscle or the strength to support yourself.
That's partially true. The other part of that is flexibility. So if you think of something that's very flexible and you drop it on the floor, it's probably not going to break. But if you think of something very
Mm.
rigid and you drop it on the floor like a piece of glass, it's going to break. So when you see a lot of older people who are in their 70s and 80s and 90s who have very little flexibility, they have very little movement in their body, they have very little strength in your body. When they fall, something's got to give. Either it's going to be a torn tendon for a muscle, or it's going to be a broken bone somewhere. And so what we want to do is understand that once we get to 35, 40 years of age, we start to lose muscle mass somewhere around 0.8 to 1% per year over our lifetime for the rest of our lives. And what we want to be able to do with that is to maintain and keep that muscle mass up and keep our flexibility up, because the muscle mass allows you to hold yourself up, walk around, and continue to be mobile and independent. The flexibility allows the joints to move freely so that you don't damage your joints and you don't damage a disc in your back, which allows you to be able to do all the things that you want to do.
And when it comes to, as you say, the building of that muscle,
Mm-hmm.
Uh, does muscle growth deteriorate over age? Because what I'm seeing in people, most of my listeners are in the bracket of 25 to 50.
Yeah.
And especially in the younger group of 25, they're like, oh, it's easy to put muscle on. They've
Yeah.
got the
Yeah.
newbie gains and all this.
Yeah.
So they don't worry about it as much. And
Right.
then I have people in their late 30s who say, oh, it's beyond me. Getting growing muscle is too difficult, so
Mm-hmm.
why should I bother? Why should I make the effort? It takes too much time, too much investment. But that's the target where I'm like, build your muscle in your 30s, in your
Right.
hey, if you haven't started by your late 30s, there's no better time to start than now. If you haven't
Right.
started in your 40s, there's no better time to start than now because
Right.
it's only going to get more difficult the older that you get.
That is true. That is true. So in your 20s, we have plenty of testosterone because that's our childbearing years and so forth. So we have plenty of testosterone that we can just build muscles like there's no tomorrow. When we get into our late 30s, especially, testosterone can tend to start to drop. Usually for guys, it may start more into their late 40s, but you'll see a slowdown with that. And the thing to think about is, when you're working out with your muscles, think about what are you training for. So as a 45-year-old man, a 49-year-old man, chances of you participating in the Olympics or in some major sports league is probably not going to happen. So we really don't need to look like a bodybuilder. But what we want to be able to do is have enough strength that we can get up and down out of a chair, we can get up and down off the toilet or whatever. We just want to be able to have the strength that we can go and do all the things that we want to do without hurting, and then having the flexibility to go with that. So when I talk about muscles with people, there's three pillars with that. Number one, think of strength training like putting fuel in your car for power. Think of flexibility like putting oil in the engine for lubrication. And think about the food as the fuel, the quality of the fuel that you're putting in the car. So somebody could give you a brand new Lamborghini, but if you put sugar water in the gas tank, it's not going to run very well. So what does Lamborghini tell you? We want you to put premium fuel in the car. Well, when you think of your body in terms of that Lamborghini, it's like, why would you put sugar water in a gas tank that you're trying to keep it running long term? And so as you get older as a man, you're going to start losing more and more testosterone. Now, for women, they're going to lose estrogen and progesterone. And especially when they get into menopause, it's almost like dropping off a cliff at some point in their life. So for them, they want to really start early in their life, 18, 19, 20, of building their muscle mass in their body. They don't have to be a bodybuilder, but you want to have that, what they call reserve capacity. When you're younger and you build it up, it's called reserve capacity that carries you into your older age. And then as you do that and maintain it, when you're 65, 70 years old, you can still do pretty much what you did at 25 and 30, okay, without having the aches and pains. And so I'm like at 66 now. And so I get up every day. I can go out and do whatever I want, work in my yard for 3 or 4 hours. I can go play any sport that I want. and I don't have to worry about waking up tomorrow morning with a sore back or sore knees or whatever. Uh, and that's where you want to be as you get older, because the chances of us living to be 78, 79, 80 years old is pretty high. And for younger people, it's going to be even higher than that. So if our lifespan is around 78, 79, but our healthy lifespan is down to about 48, we've got 30 years of unhealthy lifespan we're going to have to deal with if we don't take care of that.
And I guess that's the trade-off that you see a lot of people when they have the idea that they're going to live longer, that
Yeah,
they say, oh, well, I can always work hard now, and then I can take care of my health down the line.
right.
And that's where you see the decline in
Yeah.
like physical ability and all this. I know some people, I hear a lot of narratives. And
Yes.
I love that. I'm very observant about the narratives that people, how they speak to others is always a reflection of how they see themselves.
Yeah.
And you can see they might feel that they're, oh, I'm not as healthy as I was in my 20s, but
Mm-hmm.
it's because of my kids. When you have kids, you'll understand that
Mm-hmm.
you won't be able to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And straight up, that's saying that you're blaming your kids for your
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy lifestyle. So
Mm-hmm.
your kids are hearing that all the time that it's because of me that that you cannot live a healthy life.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Mm-hmm.
the real narrative is that yes, okay, maybe you had given so much time to your kids, you're not really taking care of your health as much.
Right.
But if you really wanted to, because
Yes.
if you think about, I love changing the narrative from I can't to
Mm-hmm.
or I have to because of my kids to what gift can I give to my future self so that I can pick up my grandkids without
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah.
If they fall, I'll be able to pick them up. I'll be able to raise
Yeah.
them above my shoulders. What actions do I need to take in order for me to be able to do that pain-free?
Yeah.
Because as a grandchild, you're not going to
Yeah.
be one to say like, "Oh, granddad is like is in a heap on the floor and we can't pick him up."
Right.
That's not
Right.
something you
Right.
want to strive to be. No
No,
matter
no,
how
it's not.
hard you work in your 30s and 40s,
Yeah.
that's not who you want to become.
Right. 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 Yeah, exactly. So I get that from young parents a lot. Well, my kids, and I'm so busy. And okay, so you take them to the ballpark, you take them to the theme parks, you buy them this, you buy them that, and you go to different places all the time. Why not teach them how to take care of their bodies early? So kids model what we do. I have two daughters. One is 42 and the other one's 39 or soon to be. And so the thing is that if I want my kids to eat healthy, then I need to set the example as a parent. In other words, if I want myself to be healthy so that I can play with my grandkids when my kids become older, for instance, when I was younger, then I've got to eat healthy so that I'll be around. But what greater gift could I give my kids to teach them how to eat healthy so that they'll be great when that time comes too? You see, and so if I go exercise, I mean, I never saw my dad exercise as a kid. I never saw my dad really eat healthy as a kid. But the model I have, not just for me and my two daughters who are now adults with their own kids, is I'm also modeling for my friends. And it's not to say, ha ha, I can do this and you can't. No, no, no. Whatever I do, anyone in the world can do that. But if I'm not willing to do it and I know what to do, why would you be willing to do it? You see? And so if my kids grow up and they see, dad's eating healthy, dad's working out. And what's so nice now is that with their kids, which are my grandkids, they're now starting to teach them to eat healthier, and they're anywhere from 15 down to 5 years old. And as they do that, they're putting on the building blocks for their kids to be healthy for them too when they get to be older. Because, one thing I enjoy is getting in the floor and playing with my grandkids. I have six of them, actually seven of them. But I enjoy doing that. And so the thing is that I have to stay healthy so that I can do that, so that I can run around the backyard and play with them. I can pick them up. I can get down on the floor and play trucks or dolls or whatever with my granddaughters. And that's the thing is teach them. There's no better gift you could give another human being, especially when they're young, is to get them used to eating healthy and get them used to living healthy. And then you don't have to fight the choices. Everybody's worried about, childhood diabetes and obesity and all these other things. Teach them now while they're young before they do damage, serious damage. That's better than any car you could buy them because they can live a long time pain free and you don't have to worry about your kids suffering so much.
I love that. That's such a strong why, a strong reason why people
Mm-hmm.
should start now. And what better way than to have that influence on your
Yeah.
kids rather than using your kids as an excuse, make them the reason.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Exactly. And it's like, so my daughters call me all the time and they'll ask me questions about various things in their health and so forth. And one is a nurse and she's a terrific nurse, and the other one owns a gym for gymnastics and rock climbing. And I mean, they're just two amazing young women. But I hope that my model for them helped them, and I think it did. But it's like now I see them in their own kids how they're getting them to eat healthier, and so that makes it easier for my grandkids. You see, so again, when you think about what can I give my kids, give them the gift of life, give them the gift of living with no pain for long periods of time. And the people, well, they like going to Pizza Hut or they like going to McDonald's or whatever. That's a habit. And if you start to teach them, that habit will change because all of a sudden they're going to want to fit in with mom and dad, and they're going to model what mom and dad does. So if mom and dad's eating a pizza, well, sure, they're going to eat a pizza. If mom and dad's eating ice cream, sure, they're going to eat ice cream. And it's okay to have that once in a while, but to have that every day is not so good. And then if they go to work out with mom and dad at the gym, or mom and dad works out at home, either way, they go bike riding with their kids, go running or walking with their kids, then instead of making that an excuse, give them the gift of life.
I love that. What are other common excuses that you hear, and you probably hear a lot of them coming into your
Yeah.
practice? What are the
Yeah.
most common excuses that you see from people who come in with the lower back pain and they haven't done anything about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And also, I feel when you do treat them, they don't do anything about it once they leave.
Right, right, right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, people come in and there's one guy, I always teased him, and he came in one day and he said, I came to see you one day, and he said, what you did for me helped for about 2 days, and then it came back. And I said, would you do the stretching and the work that I showed you? Well, no, no, I didn't really have a whole lot of time. I'm like, but you're like retired. You have nothing else to do. I know, but I got busy tinkering around my house and I just forgot. I was kind of hoping that one visit would last. And I said, oh, so you're looking for Jesus. I go, he's like 2 doors down. You went to the wrong office, you see. So what happens is for so many people, they get in trouble. They're not real sure what to do because no one's really teaching them about what to do, which is unfortunate because they have so much knowledge about it. And then they want somebody, because they've been trained that way, to give them a pill, to give them a shot that's going to just change their life. Okay. So we have the shots now, like for losing weight and so forth, which is wonderful. Helps people who have been obese for a long time or overweight for a long time lose weight. My worry is that we're not really teaching people, and they're not really getting it, that at some point you'll come off of the shots and you need to be able to eat food the right way. Doesn't mean it has to be bad. Doesn't mean it has to taste like cardboard or anything like that. I eat a healthy diet 99% of the time, and it's like it's a great thing. And the food tastes great. It tastes great because I know that the food I'm putting into my body, I can see the results in my blood tests and my scans that are really making my body much healthier than it should be at 66, based on most people. But the thing is that it's about making choices. You can be as healthy as you want to be. And I realize that's not 100% for everybody. There are certain things that are out of our control. But I would say for 90% of the things that happen to people, so much of that is actually in their own control. And I've had doctors that say the same thing to me.
And I feel a lot of people don't want it to be in their control. Taking ownership of it is the last thing they want to do. They
I
want the quick
yeah,
fix, as you say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I would agree with some of that, but I think that for most people, it's not so much that they don't want the control. I think they're either afraid because they don't think they don't have enough knowledge, okay, and they're afraid they'll do something wrong because if God forbid you happen to make a mistake, some people you want to chastise you pretty hard. But I think that part of the problem too is even for our healthcare practitioners, we don't really teach them how to be preventative. Instead of, I mean, once you have a heart attack, we've got some brilliant people who know how to save your life. Okay. But what if we could teach people how not to have the heart attack? They go, well, you can stop stores from putting out all this bad food. No, 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 no. A business will put out what sells. So if you as people go out and you choose good food, you'll be surprised how quick businesses will start selling good food because that's what people want. I mean, why would you put something on your shelf that nobody wants, right? And that's all businesses are. And it's like, but we have to start teaching people how to do that. And that's the mistake that people have, or not people, but industries have, is that we don't spend that time to do that.
Yeah, I think that's another rabbit hole if we get into industries that want to serve people for the better
Yeah.
rather than what makes money out of people. Because it's
Yeah.
easier to give the fast food, the convenience, the comfort, and then say, oh, well, do this in moderation. That's not
Right.
going to stop people from having
No,
McDonald's every day.
no,
There's no
no.
limit on stopping people from having the McDonald's every day. You have to
Right.
practice
Right.
your own resistance or your own
Right.
discipline. But for
Right.
the people who don't have that education or knowledge or discipline instilled, and they say, "Oh, well, I can conveniently get McDonald's because
Yeah.
I
It's cheaper.
don't feel competent in cooking," and next thing
Right.
they end up with all of these illnesses.
Right, right, exactly. And so, you go back and you look, okay, from a business standpoint, their job is to make a profit for the owners, a profit for the stockholders, and so forth. Any grocery store, they'll put whatever you want on the shelf as long as you're willing to buy it. Okay. If something sits on the shelf and it doesn't buy, they get rid of it. Again, when you go back and you have people in the healthcare industry who can teach you, like I had, teach you how to eat correctly. Okay, and you start making different choices, what you'll see showing up on the shelves in your stores will be different. But we've got to start with our healthcare professionals teaching people how to live better, how to eat better, and put that together versus just here's a pill. You have a headache, here's a pill. Maybe that headache's coming from something you ate, or you have a back pain, here's a pill, here's a brace. Once you get from that standpoint, where we treat it as something defective versus there's something you don't know how to do right, and we're going to teach you how to do it right, that's where things will change. But from the person's standpoint outside, I mean, for a lot of them, they're doing as best they can to really try to get by, but they have very, very limited knowledge. And that's too bad. I mean, the things that we're talking about here, I mean, rarely do schools teach that. And so the idea that you're going to have a practitioner, unless they work on their own like I did, are you going to find somebody in the industry that's going to talk to you honestly about that?
Yeah, I think even it goes beyond that the things that are taught in school are just so that we can be the worker bees or the
Yeah,
worker ants. And
yeah,
then any problems that you have after that, you've got to figure
yeah,
out for yourself.
yeah.
And for me, in my experience with burnout was I didn't know what burnout was when I
Right.
experienced burnout. I thought I was having a heart attack at
Yeah,
27.
yeah.
And I was like, I'm pretty healthy. I go to the gym a lot. I don't know what's happening right now. I was
Right, right.
hyperventilating, having a panic attack, and I couldn't move. But
Yeah,
at the same time, I didn't want to speak up because
right.
I felt like if I speak up, I'm going to be embarrassed,
Yep,
humiliated. I don't
yep,
want to call for help. Hey, I'm only 27. This
yep,
shouldn't be happening to me. And that
yep,
narrative kept me stuck
yep,
when I should have just asked for help and got
yep.
something and did something about it. And I
Right.
feel that a lot of people find themselves in that situation where they
Yes.
are in pain, they don't know what to do about it, they've never
Yeah.
been shown what to do about this until
Right.
they find themselves in a dire circumstance
Mhm.
and then they don't know where to go for guidance.
Right. Right. It was exactly right. It's that's the sad part about the whole state of healthcare around the world is that We again, we don't really educate people about how this body works. We don't unfortunately get an owner's manual when we come into this world that we can go back and go, oh yeah, if I'm having an anxiety attack, this is what I do, uh, and so when you look at your body, each of us are different, our chemistries are different. um, there are certain things that I like that you want, there's certain things you like that I want, but it's finding out what serves you the best. And for me, I realized that things like changing the order that I ate my food, when I would eat vegetables first and then go to protein second, and then if I had any room left over, I would then eat the refined carbs. So what was nice about it was most of the time I was too full, that the time I got to the refined carbs, it's like, I don't have any more room, which was a good thing. But it's learning what works for you. So that particular way of eating has worked well for me. uh, I've talked about it in one of my food choices. If I want to lose weight, 75% of my plate will be vegetables and fruits, 20% of my plate will be protein, and 5% will be refined carbs. When I want to maintain my weight, I dial the fruits and vegetables back to about 60% to 65, and then I'll have protein at 30, 35%, and then 5% for refined carbs. The reason I do that when I'm maintaining my weight is that as I'm working out, it gives me additional protein in my body. And that's something that most people are a little short on, is protein as well. It takes a little time. We have these computers and we have the phones and stuff where we can learn so much about it. You're going to hear all kinds of different options out there. And there's the only thing I can say to people is try them, see what works for you, see what becomes successful for you, and stick with it. Be consistent. And as you do that, what happens is you're giving your body the right food, you're getting your body the right amount of movement, you're giving your body the right amount of sleep. And we learn this from blue zones. And for people that are not familiar with blue zones, these are places where people normally live to be in their hundreds, early hundreds, 100 to 110, 115. And there's common things there that you see people in their 90s and hundreds who are doing well, is that they have great relationships. They're watching the food that they eat all the time. They're eating healthy food. They're moving all the time. They're not just walking or sitting in a recliner. They are have purpose in their life every single day, and they're always learning. And then the relationships become really, really interesting, because in those blue zones, what you see is people gather to eat together. They're not eating by themselves or in the car driving from one place to the other. I used to do that when I was younger all the time. I was eating on the fly all the time. And what happens is that your body can't digest it. You're stressing out because you got so many things to do and you're trying to do so many things at one time. And it's just learning how you work. And that takes a little bit of time. So don't get frustrated with that, especially if you're young. Don't get frustrated. Try different things and see what works for you.
I love that. One thing I want to touch on, especially while I have you here,
Mm-hmm.
is the stretch and release technique that you have
Yes.
in your book. Because I feel that a lot of people, when they have these pains
Yeah.
and they don't know what to do with them, the first thing they do is either take a painkiller or go to a physio and absolutely beat the muscle to a pulp
Mm-hmm.
and get that pain out or release the tension, as they say. But I feel your approach is a little more holistic or understanding of why the tension builds up in the body in the first place.
Right. Right. So when we're talking about muscles, we basically think of muscles as a mechanical, physical thing. We When in reality, the muscles are really controlled by your brain, which also makes them pretty emotional as well. So the thing to think about is that if you're upset with somebody or you're frustrated or you're mad about something, your body gets tense. And all the thing that changed was your state of mind. So the tenseness in your muscles can come from everything you think, feel, and do. If you're working on a project and you're really pushing hard with it, your neck's going to get tight, the shoulders are going to get tight. If you're in a state of mind where you're feeling again angry or frustrated, you're going to get tight. Or if you're doing things, your muscles are going to tighten up. The muscles are really reactive tissues. And so with the stretch and release technique, what I learned from that was that there were some stretches that we could do, that was basically founded by a guy named Aaron Mattis with active isolated stretching. But if you add the brain component to it when you're stretching, instead of lengthening muscles like most physios would say, what you're doing is actually releasing the tension in the muscle. So the way to visualize that is, you take a rubber band between your two hands and you pull it to its normal length without stretching it. And then if you take and you start twisting that rubber band, the rubber band will appear to get shorter and shorter, which it does. What most people are trying to do when they stretch is it's like taking that rubber band and tighten it as tight as you can and then try to pull it. And you realize it takes way more strength to pull that rubber band than when it's at its original length. So what we're doing in stretch and release is through the mind and through the breath work is we're starting to relax the tension in the muscle before we start doing the stretches. And as we do that, now when we stretch the muscle, it becomes really easy. That's the first part of it. The second part is we looked at parts of the body, like the calf, for instance, was a prime example. Most people stretch a calf muscle like it's one muscle. And the calf really is made up of four major muscles down there. So they control the foot vertically for walking, laterally for balance, and rotationally for movements like in sports and so forth, where you're rotating your body. Once you start to learn how to stretch all four of those calf muscles, then you start to open up the use of your foot. And the foot then has like 29 muscles with 33 joints. You start to get the foot muscles working again, and you start to realize that all these special shoes that everybody's buying actually becomes more detrimental than it actually is helpful. Because once you get the muscles in your feet activated, the muscles in your calf activated, you don't need all that support. And so that was the thing, as I started learning with that, is that once I learned how to release that tension versus me strictly trying to hold for long periods of time, pull as hard as I can, because my mindset was I was lengthening the muscle because the muscle was fighting with me. I realized that I wasn't fighting with the muscle at all. I was fighting with my brain, because the harder I pulled, the more likelihood I was going to feel pain. The brain anticipates that, and it will contract the muscle to protect me from tearing a muscle, for instance. Okay. And then the longer I held it, the brain then saw that as something that was not right, and it would contract the muscle to make it right. So the brain is there to protect you 100% of the time. That's where a lot of things that people do, hanging upside down and hanging from bars, all sounds great, but they don't factor in the brain side of it. And the brain is where the key is to that.
So as you mentioned there about people hanging upside down on the bars, and
Yeah.
that's because you see that a lot in like calisthenics
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that as because we talked about, let's say, functional goals as well, that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's not building for the bodybuilder physique depending on what
Right.
age they are. But
Right.
I even see, so I'm living in Switzerland at the moment, very active people out here in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are into calisthenics, especially in
Yeah.
their 30s and their 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that is a good style of functional fitness for longevity in terms of
Absolutely. Yeah.
flexibility?
Yeah. In terms of strength and some flexibility, yes, because with the calisthenics, you're going to move in ways that the body naturally moves. And so you're not only you're building the bigger muscles, you're also building the smaller ones as well. Um, when you look at muscles, the funny thing is depending on the studies you read, some of them will say you have as little as 640 muscles, while others say you have as many as 703, which leads me to believe that we really don't know how many you do have. But there's a lot of little muscles in there as well. And what calisthenics will do is it will activate those little muscles too. And so when you do that and you start to move your body, now you have the strength. If you want to rotate your body, go forward, go backwards, go side to side, you have the strength to maintain and hold the stability around your body so you don't fall down. The flexibility part of it, it's a two-part thing. So that flexibility part of it opens up the muscles around the joints and around your spine so that you can take full advantage of all of your strength that you've been building.
So does as from my understanding of flexibility, it also
Mm-hmm.
helps with the range of motion
Oh,
that you can
absolutely.
train the muscle group. So if you can get let's say a longer or wider range of motion with a muscle
Yeah.
group, does that help with muscle growth or muscle strength over the long term?
So it doesn't help with muscle growth or strength so much. And so what you're training is really your brain. Okay. So if you got up every morning and you did a split, for instance, and your brain knew that you could do a split and there was going to be zero pain, and somebody said, "Hey, Eugene, can you do a split for us?" You would just go into it with a smile on your face because you were not expecting any pain at all. Okay. But if you've never done one and somebody asked you to do that, your brain would go into hyperdrive and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to tear everything in my body if I try to do that. Uh, so, what really you're training is your brain. Once the brain realizes that that's a safe movement and you can do that, then the muscle then relaxes because the brain is no longer worried about hurting yourself. So, what causes the muscle to to tense up has a lot to do with the thoughts in your head. Okay. And so when we're stretching, if we're going against something that we think may hurt us, the brain just won't let you do that. I mean, that's why you can't just go jump off the edge of a cliff with no parachute. It just, I mean, mine wouldn't let me do it with a parachute, but that's why it won't let you do that because the brain's like, no, you could die. We can't do that. We could die. And it will stop you. And so the same thing is true when it comes to the flexibility. The flexibility has as much to do, if not more, with the brain than the actual muscles themselves. And that's what throws people off because that's not what we're taught in school.
That's definitely not what we're taught at school.
Yeah. So
So it's the brain trying to protect you. The same as
yeah,
a lot of the mental blocks that people have when it
yeah,
comes to maybe starting their own business or
yeah,
starting down a new career path or trying something new, and their brain protects them and says, "Oh no, because we don't have any past experience with this, there is a high chance you will fail."
right.
And it's like a psychological death or an ego death or an identity death, and the brain is trying to protect from that.
Yes, yes.
So similarly, as you said, with the example of the splits being a very good example, I don't even want to think about trying one right now. My brain is definitely going to block me. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. And so when you think about anything in your life that you were nervous about, for guys asking a girl out on a date for the first time is a very scary thing. And how scared you were, and you put it off and put it off. And sometimes it's like, man, if I'd have just asked her, I could have went out with her. Now she's with somebody else. Or the first time you drove a car, how scared you were. Now all of a sudden you get in a car and you don't even think about it. That's the difference in it. So when you think about the muscles in the brain has to be in charge 100% of the time because like if you're in a building that's on fire and the brain hears the alarms, they see the fire, it's like we got to get out of here. You don't want the legs having the ability to come back and say, I don't feel like doing anything today. I don't want to move today. You want the brain to be able to get up and get you moving. So every time we stand up, people think of the muscles having muscle memory, but every time we stand up, you have a neural pathways that have been laid down in the brain that we learned as infants as we started to stand what muscles we needed to balance ourselves. So number one, we could stand up. Because remember, we're little tiny babies, we just fall over. Okay. So we had to learn what muscles to activate to make that happen. And then we had to learn when we wanted to walk, what muscles to activate so that we could walk. Now, as adults, our brain does that in milliseconds, just boom, just makes that decision and we go. And we think that that's a muscle memory. But the reality is, and I said this to a cardiologist one time, I said, I know you work with stroke patients. Yeah. So whether it's a hemorrhagic or an ischemic stroke, it's a damage to the brain. Yes. Well, if the muscles in my arm has memory and I have a stroke, why does my arm stop working? Why wouldn't my arm remember how to do that? All the thing that got damaged was my brain, you see. So the point is that the brain then controls every movement of the muscles in your body. Yeah.
is there a simple technique or a good starting point that you would recommend to anyone who either has problems with their flexibility or they have built up pains in the maybe in their lower back or things like that. This is mostly what we see from people working
Yeah.
desk jobs, especially
Mm-hmm.
ergonomically. What's a good place for them to start rather than focusing on the usual compensations of taking
Right.
painkillers or anything all the time? What's a good place for them to start to address the cause rather than to keep on alleviating the symptoms?
The first place is to buy my book on Amazon. That's the first place to start. Second place to go is to go to my YouTube channel, The Muscle Repair Shop. I've got about 200 free videos, and I get into specific things: low back pain, mid back pain, neck pain, hand pain, foot pain, knee pain. And I talk about, to give you some ideas as to what could be causing that pain, why the traditional treatments that you typically do failed or came up short, and then how to use the stretch and release technique to actually help you overcome that. I've even got into teeth grinding, which, by the way, is like the top videos on my site at this
That
point
was
now as
really good
well.
because I remember the video with going
Yeah,
along with the
yeah,
jaw. Yeah. And
yeah, yeah,
because it was so important because I hear so many people when they get stressed out. And
yeah,
next thing they say like, "Oh, I've been grinding my teeth all night." And I'm
yeah.
like, "Okay, I know exactly where to send you. I send them straight to the muscle repair shop. Be like, watch this video. You got like 10 minutes and you'll be sorted."
Exactly. And so those are the two places I'd start first, and not just because of my stuff, but it's a place to go to give you a new set of parameters as to why you have pain, what's usually causing the pain to make that happen. And the teeth grinding is a prime example of how the brain really plays a role. You're in the thought, and in thought you start to grind your teeth, and the brain really controls that more than anybody, more than anything.
And the teeth grinding itself, is that like as you said, the brain stopping you from stretching into the splits is like a protective mechanism. Is the
Yeah.
teeth grinding itself like a soothing mechanism or something that the brain is, why is the brain communicating you to grind your teeth when you've built up so much like emotional
Yeah,
stress?
yeah. So it's like any other part of your body. So as you're going through thoughts, maybe you're working on a project, or maybe you're upset with a spouse or a friend or whatever, and you're going through those ideas in your head, people will have a tendency from the stress of that of holding their mouth tight. And in some cases, the more they can hold it tighter, it's almost like it takes some of the pressure off of the thought. And that's usually what I see in most cases. And I worked with a neurosurgeon for a little while years ago, and I would see cases of people, they would give them bite guards for teeth grinding, and they would bite through their bite guards in the night while they were sleeping. I mean, that's just how hard they were grinding. And so when we started talking about the muscles of the face, and I started explaining to him what I was doing, he asked me to come in and start working on the people in the dental chair, and I did, and they started teaching them what to do. And we were able to stop over 50% of them from biting through their bite guards who'd bitten through them before. But you want to do it at night before you go to bed, because that's typically when people do it the most. But those are the kind of tidbits that, I mean, and they're free, totally free. I mean, I'm building a membership site now that where I'm going to put on should start probably next 30 days or so, but put on weekly Q&As, have live demonstrations, and I'll have tutorial videos that'll be on there just for the members who will take deeper dives into each of the stretches, so that if there's one you particularly want to see, you can go to and really learn how to do that. And so that's coming in about 30 days. Yeah.
But I love that, especially the fact that you're building out this library to help people, and
Yeah.
especially on YouTube, it's all free.
Yeah.
And that's what we can do is we can provide people all the information that they
Mhm.
need. But what needs to happen is that people need to take the action. That
Yes.
we can give
Yeah.
you all the information, but
Yeah.
it needs to be put into practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and
Exactly. Go ahead.
as you said, and I think we mentioned this before we pressed
Yeah.
record, which is why I want to really implement it now, is that I've seen you help people from like 60 and beyond because we are living longer lives.
Yeah.
But and then one of the reasons why you reached out to me as well to jump on this podcast as well, and I loved your reasoning for it, is that if we can address this at a younger age, if we
Yeah.
can start getting into preventive care in our 30s and 40s, then we can live a pain-free life for longer. And we
Yes.
won't be dealing with these niggling pains or worse, debilitating injuries into our 50s, 60s, and beyond.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it wasn't my initial plan when I first started this 20 years ago. But what I'm seeing now is that becomes very important, because if we can get people in their 30s and 40s doing it now, and we can get them to understand their bodies now, that when they're 75, 80 years old, they'll be able to do things that they did when they were 40, 45 years old. And that's that's the beauty. I mean, obviously, if you're a basketball player, for instance, you're not going to jump as high at age as you did at 40. But if you wanted to be able to live your life and do the fun things in your life that you enjoy doing, you should be able to continue to do that. And I've seen that with people that I work on here that are late 70s, 80s, and 90s, that their life doesn't stop. They just keep going.
And it's on your basketball topic as well, without me
Yeah.
going on a tangent. I've seen the opposite in terms of people who are weightlifting too
Mm-hmm.
heavy in their
Mm-hmm.
20s,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're 32 and they can't bend their knees to sit down on
Yeah.
the sofa.
Yeah.
And that's the other extreme of you're not lifting the weight or you're not doing the exercise for the
Mm-hmm.
betterment of your health. They're
Right.
they're if you're ego lifting or pushing your body to the extreme that you can no longer bend your joints in your 30s,
Yep.
you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that's the thing you want to look at too when you're working out with the weights is understand what you're lifting for. Um, going back to the split thing, and sometimes when I do talks, I'll always have usually a young lady who will say to me, "Can you do a split?" And I'll go, "No, but I don't really need to do a split. I have no need for that in my life. If I was a gymnast and I was 15, then it would be great. But the point is the same thing with the lifting the weights. If you're lifting weights, which are good, it's good for you, or you're doing calisthenics or you're doing rubber bands, and you're lifting so that you can maintain and grow your strength, that's a good thing so that you can have the strength to do what you want. If you're overdoing it like anything else, it's going to cause you problems down the road. You're going to have damage with your spine. You're going to have damage with your hips and your knees. I see a lot of power lifters that I get in their 60s to come to see me, their 50s. They're just a mess. And it's like, what was it all for? I don't even understand. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Bush. That was so good. Especially helping people to understand the difference between
Yeah.
what's like functional fitness and what's your reason for fitness, your reason for taking care of your health
Right.
now. And
Right.
I love the narrative, and I've used this for a while. It's that every time you show up to the gym or every time you show up for a workout, it's an opportunity to give a gift to your future self.
That's exactly right. And I do that in my life as well. And it's like, when you look back at yourself when you're 50, you want to be able to look back at your 30-year-old self and say, thank you. Because that's when you're going to pay the dividends for it. Okay. And so always think about that. What you're doing today, yourself 10 years from now or 20 years from now may look back and go, oh, that was pretty stupid. I wish you hadn't done that. Or it's going to say, thank you for doing that for me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Give Yourself Some Leeway. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on future conversations. And if you got value from today's discussion, please take a second to rate and review the show. It really helps us to reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, take care.